There's a reason you've been getting it wrong with women, and it has nothing to do with your appearance, your income, or how interesting you are. The problem is mathematical. Every time you chase, every time you pursue, every time you make yourself available and responsive and eager, you're broadcasting a signal that destroys attraction before it can form. And here's what makes this so dangerous. You think you're demonstrating interest and investment. You think persistence shows dedication. But game theory proves the opposite is true. In 1994, mathematician John Nash won the Nobel Prize for work that explained why two competitors pursuing the same strategy both lose. His insight reveals exactly why your approach has been sabotaging you. When every man uses the same playbook, pursuing, chasing, proving worth through availability, the entire strategy collapses. The woman you're chasing can sense the desperation in the pattern. She's seen it 1,000 times before. And the moment you join that chorus of pursuit, you become invisible. Not because you lack value, but because you're playing a game where the rules guarantee your defeat. This isn't about manipulation. This is about understanding the strategic mathematics of human desire. What you're about to discover isn't dating advice, it's game theory applied to human attraction, backed by decades of psychological research that reveals why strategic withdrawal creates more desire than any amount of pursuit ever could. Most men have been conditioned to believe that showing more interest, being more available, and investing more effort demonstrates high value. But psychologists like Robert Cialdini and Jack Brem spent their careers proving that human motivation operates on the opposite principle. Scarcity creates value. Threatened freedom triggers obsession. And the person who appears to need the outcome least holds all the power in any negotiation, romantic or otherwise. This video breaks down 7 game theory principles that reverse everything you think you know about attraction. Each one is built on research from Nobel Prize winners, clinical psychologists, and behavioral scientists who've mapped the hidden architecture of human desire. By the end, you'll understand why women chase men who seem perpetually on the verge of leaving, why inconsistent attention creates addiction, and why the fastest way to become attractive isn't self-improvement, it's strategic absence. If you're still playing the old game of pursuit and persistence, you're not just losing, you're actively destroying the attraction you're trying to create. The more intensely you pursue someone, the less attractive you become. This isn't opinion or cynical dating strategy. This is mathematics. John Nash's Nash equilibrium demonstrates that in competitive games, the optimal strategy isn't to directly compete for the most desirable option. When two players employ the same aggressive strategy, both lose. They create a race to the bottom where desperation becomes transparent and value evaporates. Think about what happens when you're chasing a woman. You text immediately, you're always available, you rearrange your schedule to accommodate hers, you agree enthusiastically to every suggestion, you demonstrate flexibility, eagerness, investment. And in your mind, you're showing her that she matters, that you're serious, that you're different from the other guys who play games. But here's what game theory reveals. You're not different at all. You're using the exact same strategy as every other man who wants her attention, which means you're caught in Nash's trap. The competitive pursuit itself destroys the value you're trying to communicate. Because when someone is that available, that eager, that easy to access, the economic principle of scarcity tells us they're low value by definition. Rare things are valuable, abundant things are worthless, and you've just made yourself abundant. This is the identity threat you need to confront. Every romantic movie, every love song, every piece of cultural conditioning has told you that persistence wins, that the grand gesture breaks through, that showing up repeatedly demonstrates your worth. But Nash proved that when everyone uses the same strategy, that strategy becomes worthless. The woman you're pursuing has experienced this pattern dozens of times. Men who text constantly, men who are always free, men who clearly have no better options. And every single one of those interactions taught her something. Availability signals low mate value.
The man who has options, who has a life full of purpose and other opportunities, doesn't have time to constantly pursue. He doesn't need to. His scarcity is apparent through his behavior, and scarcity is what creates desire. So every time you drop everything to respond, every time you make yourself endlessly available, you're broadcasting that you're not scarce at all. You're signaling that she's your only option, which paradoxically makes you nobody's first choice. This isn't cruel. This is just the mathematics of strategic value in competitive environments. Women don't chase men they can have any time. They chase men whose attention, time, and presence feels rare, uncertain, and potentially vanishing. This is where Robert Cialdini's research on scarcity transforms everything you know about attraction. He wrote, "Whatever is rare, uncommon, or dwindling in availability, this idea of scarcity confers value on objects or even relationships." Not just objects, relationships. The same psychological principle that makes limited edition products valuable, that makes exclusive clubs desirable, that makes restricted access create obsession, applies directly to human connection. When something is always available, the human brain categorizes it as low priority. When something is scarce, suddenly it becomes the only thing you can think about. This is the philosophic heart that reframes everything you thought you knew. You've been playing the wrong game entirely. You've been trying to prove your worth through availability, through consistency, through reliable presence. But strategic unavailability is what triggers the psychological mechanism that creates desire and obsession. Think about the last time someone became suddenly unavailable to you. A friend who was always free suddenly got busy. A woman who used to respond immediately started taking hours or days. What happened in your mind? You started thinking about them constantly. You checked your phone obsessively. You found yourself crafting messages more carefully, investing more mental energy, wondering what changed. That's the scarcity working on your psychology, and it's the exact same mechanism you need to activate in the other direction. Cialdini also discovered that loss is the ultimate form of scarcity. He noted, when people are reminded of what they stand to lose, they are more motivated to act. This means the most powerful form of scarcity isn't being perpetually unavailable. It's becoming unavailable after you've been accessible. It's the withdrawal that creates the psychological impact. When someone had access to you and now suddenly doesn't, their brain categorizes that as loss, which triggers motivation far more powerful than simply wanting something they never had. You're not creating desire by being a mystery from the start. You're creating obsession by giving access, then strategically withdrawing it. That's when the scarcity principle becomes a revolution in how attraction actually forms. When you withdraw attention or become less available, you're not playing games. You're activating psychological reactance, a hardwired motivation system that makes people fight to reclaim freedoms they feel are being threatened or removed. In 1966, psychologist Jack Brem published a theory that explained something nobody had properly understood before: why people sometimes do the opposite of what they're told, why receiving unwanted favors creates resentment, and why propaganda often backfires. He called it psychological reactance, and he defined it precisely. Reactance is defined as a motivational state with a specific direction, namely the recovery of freedom. When someone perceives their access to you diminishing, something ancient and powerful activates in their psychology. They don't experience it as relief or indifference. They experience it as a threat to their autonomy, to their freedom of choice, to their control over the situation. And that threat creates what Brem called motivational arousal, a drive to restore the freedom they feel is being taken away. This is why women who seemed completely indifferent suddenly start texting constantly when you pull back. You're not manipulating them. You're triggering a psychological defense mechanism that interprets your withdrawal as a threat to their freedom to access you whenever they choose. Here's what makes reactance so powerful in dating contexts. It's completely unconscious. The woman experiencing it doesn't think, my access to this person is being threatened, so now I'm motivated to restore that freedom. She just finds herself thinking about you more, checking her phone, wondering what you're doing, crafting messages to re-engage, feeling an inexplicable pull towards someone who was just background noise before. Brehm discovered that this reaction is strongest when three conditions are met. The person had freedom before. They perceive that freedom is now threatened or eliminated, and they believe they're entitled to that freedom. This is exactly what happens when you've been available and then strategically withdraw. She had access, now she doesn't, and some part of her psychology rebels against that loss of control. This explains the paradox every man has experienced but couldn't articulate. Why the moment you stop trying is often the moment she starts pursuing. You're not suddenly more attractive, you're triggering reactance. She's not falling in love, she's fighting to reclaim a freedom she didn't even realize she valued until it disappeared. Attraction flows towards whoever invests less, not because people are cruel, but because game theory shows that the player who appears to need the gain less.
Not because people are cruel, but because game theory shows that the player who appears to need the game less holds all negotiating power. This is the principle of strategic interdependence that Nash's work illuminated. Your perceived alternatives and your willingness to walk away determine your value in any negotiation, romantic or economic. Scarcity only has meaning when it's paired with genuine outcome independence. If you're scarce but obviously desperate for the outcome, the scarcity is revealed as artificial. But if you're scarce because you genuinely have other options, other priorities, other opportunities competing for your time and attention, then your scarcity communicates actual high value. This is the investment inversion. Instead of trying to prove your worth by investing more effort, more time, more emotional energy than she does, you invert the dynamic entirely. You make her invest to earn access to you. And every time she invests, by reaching out first, by asking questions about your life, by rearranging her schedule to accommodate yours, by demonstrating curiosity about your time, she's performing a psychological action that creates attachment. People value what they work for. They dismiss what comes easily. This activates loss aversion in the most surgical way possible. Loss aversion is the psychological principle that people feel the pain of loss more intensely than the pleasure of equivalent gain. And every time you over-text, over-explain, or over-pursue, you're telegraphing something devastating. You have no better options. You're broadcasting that losing this opportunity would be catastrophic to you, which means you're low value by definition. High-value individuals have abundant opportunities. They can walk away. They don't need to convince or chase because their options provide natural abundance. But the moment you demonstrate that you need this specific outcome, you've revealed that you lack alternatives, and humans are biologically wired to devalue what appears desperate or abundant. The inversion happens when you genuinely cultivate a life with multiple sources of value: purpose, mission, other relationships, opportunities, challenges that matter to you. When those exist, you're not pretending to be outcome independent. You actually are. And that authenticity radiates through every interaction. She can feel that you're not chasing her because you have nowhere else to go. You're choosing to give her attention because she earned it, and that choice is revocable at any moment. That's power. That's the investment inversion that makes attraction flow uphill. Predictable attention creates comfort, but kills attraction. Unpredictable attention creates the same addictive neurological pattern as slot machines, making someone obsessively check for your validation. This is where B.F. Skinner's research on operant conditioning becomes the most counterintuitive insight in the entire attraction equation. Skinner discovered that intermittent reinforcement schedules, where rewards arrive randomly and unpredictably rather than consistently, create stronger, more persistent behavioral patterns than continuous reinforcement. When a rat gets food every time it presses a lever, it learns quickly, but also extinguishes the behavior quickly when rewards stop. But when the rat gets food randomly and unpredictably, it becomes obsessed. It presses the lever constantly, compulsively, desperately,
because the unpredictability creates a dopamine uncertainty loop that hijacks the motivation system. This is why gambling addicts keep pulling the slot machine lever despite mounting losses. The inconsistency is the addiction, and it's exactly why strategic inconsistency in attention creates obsession in romantic contexts. You think consistency builds trust and attraction. You think being reliably responsive, always available, predictably engaged demonstrates that you're a safe choice, a stable option, someone who won't disappear. But psychology proves the opposite. Consistency creates comfort, and comfort is the enemy of desire. When someone knows exactly when you'll respond, exactly how available you'll be, exactly what kind of attention they'll receive from you, they stop thinking about you between interactions. You become part of the background, predictable, safe, boring. But strategic inconsistency, responding quickly sometimes and slowly other times, being very engaged in some conversations and distracted in others, being available certain days and completely unavailable others with no predictable pattern, creates the dopamine uncertainty loop that makes you impossible to stop thinking about. She doesn't know when the reward is coming, so her brain stays in a state of elevated anticipation. She checks her phone more. She wonders what you're doing. She invests mental energy trying to decode the pattern, and that investment creates the neural pathway that attachment follows. This isn't about being cruel or playing games. This is about understanding that the human motivation system is literally designed to become obsessed with unpredictable rewards. The fastest way to become attractive isn't to improve yourself, it's to signal through your behavior that other women already find you valuable, because humans outsource mate assessment to social proof. This is where Robert Cialdini's principle of social proof becomes the most threatening insight to your ego, because it suggests that your romantic invisibility isn't about your inherent worth, it's about the lack of visible social validation. Cialdini established that we determine what is correct by finding out what other people think is correct. In mating contexts, this means a man surrounded by female attention is automatically perceived as higher value than an isolated man with identical traits, income, appearance, and personality. The only variable is whether other women have validated him. And that external validation does more to create attraction than any amount of self-improvement or internal development. This triggers cognitive dissonance because everything you've been told suggests that you need to become worthy first, then attraction will follow. But social proof research reveals that worthiness is almost entirely socially constructed through visible validation from others. You don't become attractive and then get attention. You get attention and then become attractive. This is why men in relationships suddenly get more attention from other women. Nothing about them changed. Their appearance, personality, humor, income, all identical to when they were single and invisible. But now there's a signal. Another woman chose him. Another woman invested her time, attention, and commitment in him. And that social proof cascades. Other women see the validation and instinctively assume he must have value they're not immediately seeing. They outsource the assessment work to the woman who's already with him, trusting that she did the evaluation. This is also why men seen in the company of attractive women, even platonically, experience increased attention from strangers. The social proof is operating, the abundance signal is broadcasting, and every woman who sees it performs an automatic, unconscious calculation that if other attractive women are giving him attention, he must be worth pursuing. You can verify this yourself through simple behavioral changes. Start being seen with women, even just friends. Post photos where female friends are present. Mention in conversation the advice you got from your female coworker or the perspective your friend shared. Every subtle signal that women are part of your social ecosystem creates the abundance impression that makes you more desirable. Changing the perception of your options changes your desirability instantly without changing who you are. The ultimate game theory move isn't to play harder, it's to stop playing entirely, forcing the other person to either pursue you or reveal they were never genuinely interested. Both outcomes give you perfect information. This is where Nash's insight completes the strategic picture. You can't win a game where both players use the same strategy. When every man is pursuing, chasing, investing, proving worth through availability, the counter move that changes the entire dynamic is calculated withdrawal. You exit the competition entirely. You stop chasing, you stop initiating, you stop making yourself available. And in that strategic absence, something remarkable happens. Women who were genuinely interested but comfortable in the pattern of receiving attention suddenly have to make a choice: pursue you themselves or let the connection die. Women who were never really interested, who were just enjoying the validation of your pursuit without any authentic attraction, reveal themselves through silence. Either way, you gain information that months of chasing would never give you. You discover who actually values access to you versus who just enjoyed the ego boost of being chased. That's not giving up. That's conducting a perfect experiment that reveals authentic interest versus polite tolerance. Strategic withdrawal also simultaneously triggers every psychological principle we've covered. It creates scarcity because your attention is now rare and dwindling. It activates reactance because she's losing a freedom she had before. It inverts investment because now she has to work to regain access. It introduces intermittent reinforcement if you do occasionally re-engage, making the unpredictability addictive. And it signals abundance because only a man with other options can walk away from attention. Every single mechanism that creates attraction gets activated in one strategic move. This is why the advice to just stop caring or move on so often accidentally works. Men interpret it as giving up, but what they're actually doing is finally employing the only game theory strategy that can't lose. If she pursues after your withdrawal, you've created authentic attraction where none existed before. If she doesn't pursue, you've discovered that continuing to invest would have been wasted effort regardless. You save time, preserve dignity, and create space for opportunities with people who actually value your access. The withdrawal isn't a tactic, it's a filter. It's a truth-revealing mechanism that separates performance from authentic interest. And paradoxically, it's the move that creates more genuine attraction than any amount of pursuit ever could.
And paradoxically, it's the move that creates more genuine attraction than any amount of pursuit ever could. If you've made it this far, something in you is ready to change. Not ready to learn some tricks or manipulations, but ready to confront the mathematical reality of how attraction actually forms. Everything you've been taught about romance, that persistence wins, that grand gestures break through, that demonstrating endless availability proves your worth, was designed to make you a perpetual chaser in a game where chasing guarantees defeat. Game theory reveals a different path. Strategic withdrawal instead of desperate pursuit, calculated scarcity instead of constant availability, investment inversion where she works to earn your attention instead of you working to earn hers, intermittent reinforcement that makes your presence addictive rather than predictable, abundance signals that make other women's validation do the attraction work your own efforts never could. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. This is about understanding the strategic mathematics of desire and refusing to play a game where the rules guarantee your loss. Women don't chase men who chase them. They chase men who seem perpetually on the verge of leaving, whose attention feels rare and potentially vanishing, whose lives contain options and opportunities that make time with her a choice rather than a desperate need. That's not manipulation. That's just the game theory of human attraction operating as it always has, invisible to everyone who never bothered to learn the rules. The men who win this game aren't the most handsome, the wealthiest, or the most charming. They're the ones who understand that power flows to whoever needs the outcome least. They've built lives so full of purpose, mission, and opportunities that any single romantic connection becomes just one option among many. And that outcome independence, that genuine abundance, that willingness to walk away, that's what creates the scarcity and reactance and social proof that makes women pursue instead of being pursued.
You can't fake this. You can't pretend your way into outcome independence, but you can build it by actually creating a life worth living, independent of any woman's validation. And the moment that becomes real, the moment you genuinely would rather walk away than tolerate low investment or mixed signals, something shifts. You stop chasing. You start choosing. And suddenly the game theory mathematics that were working against you start working in your favor. That's not just a strategy, that's freedom.